Why even try? This is a question a Year 12 drama student asked me yesterday when we were doing a Q&A about AI and the impact it has now and in the future. And they're referring to, why even bother when AI can create art, AI can create music, AI can create videos. Why even bother with the arts and the creative fields anymore? And it's interesting because this is literally in the same week that Google has just released, I think it's called VO3 and Flow, which are video creation AI platforms that can create a full cinematic production just in a single prompt. And you can edit in real time just by being explicit with your prompting. And it was just reminding me of a story about Picasso. So Picasso was sitting at a bar and this lady recognized him and she asked him for a drawing. So he quickly got a napkin and he drew a bit of a drawing for her. And then when he went to give it over, before he gave it to her, he said, "It's $10,000. And she said, well, that only took you about 30 seconds to draw it. No, he replied, it took me 30 years to be able to draw like that. You're not paying for the product, you're paying for the process. And this is where this whole idea of passion and agency comes into it. And it was a really, really robust discussion. And it just gave me a lot of hope because there's all this stigma around, using AI to shortcut and cheat and do all these things. But the questions that I was getting from these Year 12 students were enlightened. They were really critical. They were thinking deeply about the implications that AI has for them and others, and not just to accept that we have to use this, we have to go down this path. And it was one of those pursuits of inspiration and critical thought that if we don't question and have a critical lens over the responses that we're getting from AI, well, we can just accept like the new status quo of this is how it's going to be. And some of the responses that this release from Google had regarding Flow and VO3 were interesting. It was the same concept I discussed the other day about the surgeon or the radiologist who spent 20 years learning this skill to identify disease in lungs, and then AI can do pattern recognition and spot it within seconds. It's the same kind of thing. The expert can still prompt better than the person who has no idea about the concepts. However, there's one person highlighted on this conversation that you can just use an example. Hey, model this film, model this way of production, model this style, and then away it goes. But at the end of the day, the discussion with these students highlighted that we don't necessarily have to accept what everything is being put in front of us. And instead, we're going to be working alongside these AI for a little bit to enhance our abilities. But it's interesting that the style of raw content, the way we talk and interact with people online is becoming more and more raw and authentic. It's less about, retention editing and fancy titles and fancy edits and all these things. And it's more this kind of thing where it's just talking to camera of your experiences, what's happening in the real world. Because I feel like the more we start going down this rabbit hole of AI and systematizing the processes and really augmenting our experiences, the more in-person communication and experience is going to be valued. And it brought up another point where what are we going to trust? And we've talked about this before, that trust is the new oil in anything education. How do we know that this is in our best interest? How do we know that this is actually good for us? How do we know that this artwork was created with a good intention? Because people aren't going to stop creating art. People aren't going to stop, exploring their passions. And that was the point of that conversation, that what are these negative, I suppose, side effects that we are seeing with AI in human sort of development? But it's yet to be uncovered. But it's also exciting to see the level of critical thought that these students are having, rather than, the stereotypical, we're just doing it to shortcut. We're doing it to really enhance our abilities. And they talked heavily about the use of AI for companionship and therapy. And it just highlighted the point from Harvard's research again that therapy and companionship is number one use case for AI at the moment. So it's a really powerful conversations having with them, with your students, and figuring out what's going on for them, and just understanding the perspective from different sides of who might be involved, who might not be involved, and what the future may hold. But at the end of the day, all those philosophical practices that are associated with the present are still so relevant. And we talked about that heavily about, well, if you go out hiking, and you don't have access to technology, all that disappears. All the dreaded future disappears because you switched off. You're here, you're in the present moment, you're just focusing on your next step. And when we are looking at this rabbit hole that is coming, this real, basically a tsunami of creative work, it is coming in. We just got to come down to what's in our circle of influence and what can we control right now, and then take it one step at a time. Because it's easy to get overwhelmed and anxious about all these things. And if no one's going to value the creative fields, no one's going to value your knowledge and expertise. But I don't believe that's the case. I feel like your knowledge and expertise and your passions make you who you are. And that's the whole concept of personal branding. People align with people that they're interested in because of similarities in their likes, their interests, the way they talk, the way they communicate. And yes, AI can do that really, really well. And there's some very, very explicit versions of that. They showed a news presenter with this Google's AI that was fluent, articulate, and it looked exactly like an ABC news presenter. And that might be where we get our information from. But there was another point that was made that as these things become easier, like the swiping, the scrolling, the doing the tasks, we will spend less time on the task kind of operations and more time on the things that actually matter for us. So I think it's a message of hope, especially for our younger generations who are coming through, and they are putting that critical lens on, are we accepting this? What is the impact on environment? What is the impact on creativity? And what is the impact for human connection? So just some food for thought. Remember, keep thinking critically and have that agency of free choice and autonomy, but coming back to what's in our circle of influence, what can we control, and we should be just taking it one step at a time. Remember, effort equals results. I'll see you in the next one.